want to do a special segment where we look at who is actually gettable this year.
Absolutely. This is our wall of trades. This is who is gettable, Riley, and I love the graphic. It looks fantastic. They've done a great job here. We're going to go through 30 plus names and the latest updates on every single one of them. Let's get started over here.
Yes.
Follow me, follow me, follow me.
Let's do it.
All right, Harry Perryman. Lots of talk about Harry, and there has been throughout this year. Obviously, the Hawks are interested. They sent the delegation up there. I still think that Port Adelaide lead the race here, and the Giants also have 5 years on the table. So that, for me, is where it sits for Harry Perryman. I have Hawks in third place. I think Josh Battle and Bailey Smith, they're probably their priorities. Don't also have it at $800K a year, but still it's going to be a strong offer to get him out there. That's where I see that one. I don't think Adelaide's in that mix anymore. No. Caleb Daniel is obviously got a couple of years to go on his deal at the Dogs. Going to have to find a suitor to get him out of there. Not sure where that is at the moment. Chad Warner, this is more for next year, but there is interest, of course, this year from Fremantle and also from West Coast. As we said last week, there's been contact between the clubs directly with Warner this season. So still a watch probably for 25, though.
Yeah, contracted for 2025 as well. Adam Tomlinson back in the Melbourne side over the last couple of weeks in their back line. We know how hard it is to get a key defender over the line. I wonder if a club comes for Adam Tomlinson second half of the year, has been looking for opportunities in the past and says, is this someone that we can get in as a ready-made option for 2025? What about Tom Barrass at the Eagles?
Well, you talked about it. It's so hard to get the best key defenders, and he is one of the best key defenders. The Bulldogs are coming hard, though. My understanding is that the deal is worth more than $3 million over a long period of time there. He's still got the Eagles for 3 more years on his contract at the moment. They're in discussions on extending that as well. Still in play, and the Dogs have to be ready there if he does decide to look at his options at the end of the year. Collingwood no longer in that mix, I believe. Collingwood are in the mix, though, for Mark Keane. That one keeps getting linked as well, a return potentially for him, but he is contracted, so the Crows would have to get something to give up something.
Logan McDonald at the Swans?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that if he does depart, it'd be back to Western Australia and to Fremantle leading the race there. But I think the most likely option is that he stays at the Swans. And I think it's probably through to free agency. I think that would be what he'd most likely do and follow Errol Gould's lead there to get through to that 8-year mark. Daniel Rioli, a different case altogether, given he's contracted for a few more years at the Tigers. But the Suns have interest and they have picks. So it'd take a good swathe of picks to get something across the line.
Yeah.
But given his contract status, Richmond can kind of dictate that one if they do decide to load up this year and get into the draft really heavily before Tasmania comes in.
Jed Buslinger, the West Australian, a first-round pick from a couple of years ago, hasn't made his AFL debut for the Western Bulldogs yet. What do you see his future?
Well, it has a table has an offer on the table, I should say, at the Bulldogs. So I think most likely to stay there. Ben Ainsworth.
RFA corner.
Yeah, it is RFA corner, that's right. A couple of the restricted free agents who are left over at this point to make their decision. And he has a big one to make. Had played one of the best games of his career and on the weekend for the Suns, so is in terrific form at the moment. Has 4 years on the table from the Gold Coast, plus a trigger for a 5th season. But also Essendon chasing really hard, which we revealed about a month ago on this show. And I'd expect that if they're going to drag him out of there, they'd have to be offering a 5-year deal as well. Port Adelaide had interest, but I don't think it's going to be that one for him. I think it's either the Bombers or stay at the Suns. Zerha, well, this is a mystery for me a little bit because he's had a 5-year deal on the table at North Melbourne since the start of this season. 700 to 750K, around that mark, I'd expect, and hasn't really got into the negotiation phase of that. That's still sitting there. Other clubs are curious around where that one sits. Collingwood has been linked, but I think it's probably more unlikely at this point. But we wait and see which way that goes.
What about Dylan Shield, the Essendon veteran? Got 1 year left on his deal, the Bombers, though.
Yeah, as gettable as they come. I think he should look around, and the clubs will be maybe more interested in him this year, given he only has 1 year to go on his contract.
Lane Baker.
Oh, well, this is a hot one and a hot ticket in town because West Coast has a long-term deal in front of him. So does Fremantle. I'll expect those deals to be around 5 years. Richmond has a long-term deal in front of him as well. I think we'll get to decision time soon for Liam Baker.
Harry Petty, back in the Melbourne's team, playing as a forward this year, had that interest from Adelaide, that really strong interest from Adelaide, but he's a free agent, still contracted for
weirdest situation in footy, this one for me. I think he's got 1 year to go on his contract. He's barely got a kick all year. Been better recently as a forward, but I think he's still his best footy as a defender. 1 year to go. Does Adelaide give up as much as they were willing to give up last year to get this done? Does Melbourne take it or take him on for another year knowing they're going to get a compensation pick next year? Very strange situation and interested to see where it goes now. Jack Carroll is out of contract at the Blues, so I think there's clubs looking at him, including West Coast from the Carlton Footy Club.
Another West Australian, Tim English, free agent as well.
Yeah, and closing in on getting closer to his contract at the Bulldogs. I think this one's getting much closer over the last few weeks. I think he'll be one to sign off reasonably soon. He's got a 5-year deal in front of him. I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. So I think they'll be able to lock him up pretty soon. And there's Nick Bryan down there. Well, if he's off the ruck merry-go-round soon, Tim English, then Nick Bryan's absolutely on it. He's got a year to go on his deal at the Bombers, but it hasn't been a breakthrough. In saying that, as I said last week, I'm certain Adelaide will make a big play for Sam Draper next year. So, and Todd Goldstein's, however old he is, one of the oldest players in the competition. So Essendon has to be aware of what's coming up next year as well in their ruck stocks.
All right, let's move it along. What about Josh Rotham at the Eagles?
Well, a new name to add to the mix here, unrestricted free agent, doesn't have an offer yet in front of him from the Eagles. I think there's interest out there, and I think there's potentially some opportunities out there for him as well. So that could be one that does get on the move in the next little bit of the season.
Denver Granger Barras, another uncontracted key defender. We've spoken about those and how hard they are to get. Hasn't played a game this year because of that foot injury. We spoke to his manager, Tom Seckel, a couple of weeks ago on Gettable, who said he'll be looking to get into those discussions over the next couple of weeks. So I think it's a big month or so for Denver Granger Barras. What about Jake Stringer? Still unsigned at the Bombers.
Yeah, as we said last week, it's probably the $650,000 question when this does happen. Hasn't got an offer in front of him yet from the Bombers. I think that'll happen at the end of the year. It's just a matter of how long it is. It probably ends up about 2.
Isaac coming back in the side after calf and quad injuries over the weekend. He was fantastic, one of their best against Port Adelaide, but an unrestricted free agent, so clubs are going to come for him second half of the season.
Yeah, that's right. And Alex Davies, another new face to add to the mix. We haven't spoken about him this year, but he is an academy player from the Suns. He can't get a game at the moment given their midfield strength. He's a ball winner. There's not many midfielders in the market, so he's one that is getting interest, and I think he's a lot more gettable this year than last year, than when he did have some interest then too.
Shea Bolton signed that long-term deal at the Tigers.
Yeah, and that's going to be the issue if he tries to get out of it and if Fremantle tries to rip him out of there. I obviously have selections to get something done, but I don't think that one happens this year. Despite having some interest throughout the year at different times around heading back to Western Australia, I think it's much more likely that he stays, probably more so than Dan Rioli as well.
Pistol Pete Laddams at the Swans.
I think, look, there's interesting that we haven't really spoken about him as a member of the ruck merry-go-round yet, but we're including him now because he is behind Brodie Grundy playing some great VFL footy. Could he go to a third club? He's got a year to go on his contract, so that makes it a little bit more challenging whether the Swans would actually let him go. But there are clubs having a look at him to see if he could be the man because there just aren't too many on the merry-go-round this year.
Nick Haynes, one of the veterans at the Giants, got back into the side before he suffered that hamstring injury. He's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. Wants to play on into 2025.
Yeah, I think you'll have a suitor, if not the Giants, for an extra year. This time around, compared to last year, they don't have the money to bring in, the money to inherit, the contract to inherit. So it's a very different situation this time around. Brandon Parfin, I think, as an unrestricted free agent, should head elsewhere this year. He had some interest last year, started this season really well in the senior side for the Cats, has dropped out of that in more recent times, but I think it's probably time to look around for him. Rory Lobb, you spoke to him this week?
Yeah, spoke to him yesterday for a feature on afl.com.au over the weekend. Still got a couple of years left in his deal. I get the sense from him that his situation is if he's playing, he's staying. Obviously moved back into the back line over the weekend and did really well, took 6 intercept marks against the Kangas. So if he stays in that team in the back line, I reckon he might stay at the Western Bulldogs beyond that.
This Jacob Constanti, it's a big face you might not know too much of, but he was a top 20 pick a couple of years ago at the Swans. Unsigned for next year. There are clubs looking at him. I think he's pretty gettable as well, small forward.
Jack Lukosius?
Different case, very much a different case. A face you would know. He's got 2 years to go on his contract at the Suns at good money, but given the money Adelaide's been moving around and offering to different players across time, I wouldn't be surprised if they did jump into this one a little bit more seriously as the year goes on. Still playing some better footy now as a forward, which I think is his preference. Matt Owies, I mean, you've been big on this for a little bit.
Yeah, he's going to be a massive target for clubs. I believe that interest in Matt Owies is now red hot from around the competition. You reported over the weekend that Tyson Stengel has re-signed at the Cats for another 5 years. I reckon clubs who are after a small forward and were in that Tyson Stengel market have now moved their attention to Matt Owies as being someone who is potentially gettable at the end of the year. Third highest goal kicker of the Blues behind Harry Mackay and Charlie Kerner.
Same for Joe.
Same with Joe Richards, who got back into Collingwood's side over the weekend, but he's shown good signs this year, yet to start talks with the Magpies on a new deal. I reckon those two are now in the small forward market.
We need a name for that.
Yeah, we do.
Jack Graham is an unrestricted free agent, premiership player, obviously, at the Tigers. I think talks will start to ramp up a little bit more on a deal at Richmond soon.
Okay.
I think that's a likely scenario at the moment. Given the compensation pick wouldn't be drastic if he does leave. West Coast has had some interest through the year. Jack Martin's an interesting one too.
Yeah, he certainly is. So out of the side at the Blues at the moment as he battles another calf injury, expected to come back next week. Fremantle's a club that's had interest in Jack Martin for quite some time now. I expect them to be in the market for Martin again at the end of the season. What about Josh Battle? unrestricted free agent at the Saints.
Battle Born, this is Battle Torn. He is it's one of my favourite Killers albums, Battle Born. He is a player who's wrestling with his decision at the moment. He's got 6 years on the table from Hawthorn, which we spoke about last week and revealed on afl.com.au. Also 6 years on the table from St Kilda to make that happen as well and keep him at the footy club. He's an unrestricted free agent. I've seen him described as a restricted free agent.
Yeah.
There's a big difference there. He's an unrestricted free agent, so that means that the Saints will get compensation for him, but they won't get an opportunity to match an offer for him. I think it's leaning towards leaving at this point, given the opportunities available for him at the Hawks in particular. They're leading the race ahead of Melbourne. And Bailey Smith, last but certainly not least, one of the biggest names in it, back from Europe. I think we'll get a clear sign pretty soon on whether it's the Cats or the Hawks for him.